four totally different guys who've done four totally different things, who've made an impact on our world in four different kinds of ways. J.R.R. Tolkien, one of the greatest fictional writers in the last foreseeable time, wrote The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, all kinds of great things that Middle Earth, if you were a teenager and young person like I was that did not like to read, when I got a hold of his books, I fell in love with them. He was also a great friend of a guy by the name of C.S. Lewis, who they would go and hang out together and share stories and their writings with one another. And if you watch C.S. Lewis writings and J.R. Tolkien's writings, they had the same kind of theme, where good conquers evil, where ultimately the godly wins every time. It's interesting how those two influenced each other. Babe Ruth, one of the greats all time in baseball, incredible hitter, incredible pitcher. At a time when there was not a lot of working out and scientific drugs and everything else, he was able to do something that no one could do today in that same kind of scenario. John Lennon wrote some of the music that's some of the most influential things that we have ever heard, that still is played today, that is arguably probably the most famous and best music group to probably ever live in our lifetime. And Steve Jobs, who isn't carrying an iPhone right now, who doesn't use the technology that he helped develop. And each one of those men have something in common. Each one of those men's mothers and fathers, for whatever reason, abandoned them. Each one of those men had mothers and fathers that chose something for themselves over them. They had a parent who died and another parent that said, "This is too much." They were left, abandoned, and orphaned. Each one of them, society could have written off. Each one of them, society could have said they're just trouble. They live out on the streets. They're nothing. But someone in each one of their stories valued them. Someone saw something inside of them and stood up for them. Someone took them in their home. Someone that gave them a family. Someone gave them love and companionship that they needed. And because of that, they flowered into something that changed the world. When we talk about this idea of orphans today, when we talk about, and I know that we do a sermon like this every year, the second week in November. But the change doesn't, even though we come every year on this, the need doesn't change. 153 million orphans in our world right now, estimated, an easy estimate. That's not taking into fact the wars that are going on right now. That's not taking into fact the total drug addictions and the death of people that are doing that and are leaving their children beside because they've made choices to not choose their children first. As a matter of fact, if we're really truthful, we probably have people who sit inside our auditorium today that feel somewhat like at some point in their life maybe they were abandoned, that their parents chose an addiction or they chose a desire for themselves over their children. And they may have gone through some of this. And I want us to look this morning how God feels about that. And the first thing I want you to understand that God is a God who steps up to be the Father. God is a God that says, I will fulfill that void. I will be the father to the fatherless. I will take care of those who have no one. I will be the champion for the oppressed. In Psalm 68, it says in verse 5 and a part of verse 6, it says, a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. God sets the lonely into families. Not only is he a champion of those who have felt abandoned, but he sets them into a family. He puts them into a place. He gives them meaning and worth. And we are a part of that story. We are the hands that put these children into somewhere where they belong. And we change the lives of others. The truth of the matter is that I would love to be able to put up the slides of here is a young lady, here is a young man that has changed the world because of the faith that was given to them. Because they're out there. They're out there. There are countless numbers of grown ups and children that have been loved by the church, have been taken care of by the church, have been nurtured by the church, who have gone on to serve the Lord in great ways. But our society doesn't go, hey, here's Anne and she gives to the needy. She cleans the home of the widows. Here is Steve, and Steve, he goes in and he collects extra food and gives food at the food pantry. Here is Mike, who goes and preaches to the homeless. They're not touted in high regard, but in God's eyes they are. And there are countless numbers like that, that because of the gift of giving and love and compassion that the church showed to them, they are in the church and doing great things today. I promise you, I know the stories of so many of you all, that there are some that sit in here right now that will tell you because of somebody in the church. That's the reason why they're here. Because of the love when they felt alone. Because of the compassion when they were children that they had and were given. Because of the church, they are here today and doing great things. We also need to understand that there are children who have been abandoned in a world that is just unjust. When we see these orphans and these children who have been abandoned, we need to understand that they did not do it to themselves. They had no choice in the matter. They didn't choose for one of their parents to get sick and to die. They didn't choose for their father to be at war and to be killed. They did not choose for their mother to have an addiction so much that she was willing to sacrifice her relationship with her child to feed the addiction. They didn't choose that. They didn't choose a mom was so in love with a brutal and horrible person as a father that would beat the mother and the child, and she chose to stay with him instead of choosing to rescue her babies. They're just the victims of what has happened. They're just the byproduct. And God sees that. And God feels their pain. And God says he will deal with that. In Psalms 10:14 it says, "But you, God, you see the trouble of the afflicted. You consider their grief and you take it in hand. The victims commit themselves to you, and you are the helper of the fatherless." God, they have nowhere to turn but you, and you help them. In Deuteronomy 10, it says, he defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. God is one that's going to take care of the needs of the children and of the widows. This is the God that we serve. This is the God that we have committed ourselves to when we went into the waters of baptism. That we would follow him wherever he called for us to follow, and we would do whatever it is that we need to do. You know, several years ago, I was working for a church in Tulsa, and it was one of the last ones to still run a bus program. And it was still pretty successful, and we'd have 50 or 60 kids come even on Wednesday night. And they noticed that as we were at church, they were coming on Wednesday night and they had nothing to eat. A lot of these kids didn't have parents around very much, and they were coming on their own just to have a place to go. And I can remember that we would serve dinner on Wednesday nights for the congregation, but it was really Everybody was bringing food in to feed the children. And I'll never forget that they would come in and they'd be scraggly and dirty and snotty nosed and just kids that just weren't being taken care of. And they would go get in line and they'd, oh, I want some of that. And they'd grab some of that. And I remember our people kind of going, we're going to bring a lot. And we know where they're at. So we'll go ahead and eat before they get here because I don't want to touch it after they touch it. But they didn't see it and they didn't go, we can't have them here anymore. They need to learn better manners. They need to do this better. They're just problems. They're trouble. We saw them as the children that they were. They were in need. That they had to be taught and they needed to be learned. And in the midst of that, over time, the bus ministry while I was there stopped. And they decided that wasn't what they were going to do anymore. And a huge group of people stepped up in the church and said, I will go pick them up. And one of the most beautiful things happened because we went from a group of kids that are people who didn't really know them, who brought food for them, who wouldn't sit with them, but were caring in their own way, became the people who said, I will pick you up from your home, and you will sit with me at church, and I will love you, and I will care for you, and I will build a relationship with you, and I will value you, and I will help change your world. And they became those hands of God. They began living the scriptures that we're seeing. See, we have a great ability to give of our funds, but not of ourselves. And my challenge for you all this morning is that when we help those who are in need, it's more than just giving $1. It's giving of ourselves. God calls for us to do more. As children of God, we are called to actually care for the children. Let me show it to you in Scripture. James 1:27 says this, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless as this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. The world looks at them as good for nothing and trouble. The world looks for them as something that's just going to cost you your time and your money, and they're probably not going to change anyway. The world looks at them as less than human sometimes. And let's be honest, they're hurting. And they're troubled sometimes because they don't know how to respond to a world who's done so many things to them. And they don't know what real love is, let alone the love that God can give them. And they don't know how to respond to it because they've never had it. And the world will tell us it's not worth your time. But I want you to see what James says. Do not be polluted by the thoughts of the world, because they are worth it. They are valuable. Lastly, I want to show you that the children of God, we're called to share our resources. In Deuteronomy 14, it says, at the end of every 3 years, bring all the tithes of that year's produce and store it in your own towns. So the Levites who have no allotments or inheritance of their own, and the foreigners, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns may come and eat and be satisfied. And so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. I want you to see the last part. When we give our resources for those who are in need, God blesses us. God gives us an abundance. God takes care of us because we are doing His work. Because we are doing the thing that God called for us to do. Jesus in Luke 12 starts telling parables. And in the midst of telling his parables, he starts telling this parable about a wedding time and being prepared for a wedding. And then the apostles ask him, why are you saying these parables? What are you trying to get at? And he goes into another parable. And this one, he tells it a little bit different. He said there was a master who had expectations of his servants, and he gave them an abundance. And he wanted them to make sure that everything was taken care of and that people were ready when he came back. But because he did not come back for a long time, they became stagnant and lazy. They became self-indulgent and self-seeking. And they no longer took care of the responsibilities that they were called to take care of. And they just took care of themselves because they did not think the master was really coming back. He said, but the master does come back. And the master will look and see what has been done. And you want the master to be pleased that you've taken care of the abundance that he has given you. And then he says these words, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. Church, we have been given so much. There's not a person sitting in here that does not have an abundance. There's not a person sitting in here who has not had plenty on their table, who doesn't have a stocked up fridge right now, who doesn't have the food that they need, who's not driving a pretty nice car more than likely, that runs and is taken care of, who doesn't have some kind of internet or cable TV with an abundance of clothes. When you got up this morning and you looked in your closet, you didn't say, is it the blue shirt or the red shirt? You literally looked at hundreds of pieces of clothing to try to decide what you were going to wear today. And you went to your dresser and you looked at your 40 pairs of socks and your multiple t-shirts and your shorts and your pants and all the different things that God has blessed you with. As you drive to your job that pays you an enormous amount of money, even though you don't think that it is. But if you lived in another country, you would be one of the richest people in the world to them. And God has blessed you. And God has demanded us that when we have been given much, that we are demanded to take care of the much that we've been given and to take care of those who are in need. And as God continues to bless you, and Lord, I hope that each one of you are being blessed more and more. I know some of you all have newer jobs that are taking care of you even better than you could have imagined. Some of you all you're getting ready to get promotions and bonuses at the end of the year. Some of you all have so many blessings that you've been able to buy your houses and the nicer things. And as Christmas comes, you're trying to decide how many hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to spend on people. And God is blessing you. And we should be thankful for the blessings that we have. But we need to understand that when God showers these blessings on us, that He entrusted us to do even more. That God's not a God that calls for us to be stagnant, to live in 1990 or 1985 and to hold on to things and still do that. God says, as I give you an abundance, I entrust you to do the right thing with it. And if you trust me, God says, I will give you even more. And so as we look at today, this is not a cry for you to write a bigger paycheck, to buy more things for the kids in need. But this is a talk to you to make you realize is that you cannot outdo God. The blessings that you have when you take care of those who are in need will motivate you to do it even further. The blessings that you have when you give of your time, you give of your efforts, you give of yourself to make a difference in somebody's world will be repaid in multiple ways. Church, we are a very giving and loving church. We intentionally set up opportunities for us to do this. My hope and my prayer for you is that we take advantage of those opportunities. Just in this month and a half, we give family meals to 10 to 15 families in this community Then turn around and today I put up the board for the foster children who won't have Christmas without us. And I put a little blurb in the bulletin, and before I could even get up here and announce it, almost every card is gone because we believe in doing this work. And we've already passed the plates this morning to take care of orphans throughout the world. And our youth groups go to different children's homes to take care of those kids who are in need. And many of you all have gone on mission trips and different sacrifices to do that as well. And I know there's a number of you all that quietly, privately are going and feeding the homeless, who are taking care of people in need, who are stopping and taking care of the people on the street because you believe in this mission. Just know that God is showering blessings on you because of this. We are God's people. When we see the scriptures that God says He takes care of these children, when we see the scriptures that says He takes care of these widows, we need to understand that we have been called to His service, and the way that He takes care of them is us. We can't be a people that turn our eye and look the other way. We need to be a people of compassion and understanding that people sometimes are in situations that they had no control over. And that we have the opportunity to share Jesus with them through our actions, through our words, through our funds, that we change lives. I want you to know, church, that when the plate went around a few minutes ago and you debated on how much you were going to put in there, and you've been kind of thinking about it because we've talked about it the last couple of weeks, and you thought, boy, I don't know, this is not a whole lot, but this is what I can do. I want you to know that what you did made a difference. That you changed a child's life by what you did today. And I thank you for that. Because you're changing this world that is corrupt and a messed up world, and we're giving it back to God through all of our different means of doing it. This morning, maybe you are one who is, as I talked in the beginning, felt kind of abandoned in the past. Maybe you're sitting here now and you kind of feel alone. You feel fatherless. Maybe your father has passed. Maybe your family are disconnected with you because of what you believe, because you stood up for the Lord and they couldn't understand that. Maybe you've made sacrifices to be here today. I want you to know that your Father sees your sacrifices. Your Father is calling for you to let Him be your Father, to love you and to nurture you, that He sees your plight and He is sending His people to you. That there are people here today that are here to rally around you so you don't have to feel alone, because you are not alone. Your Father and His children are here with you. We are in His family. He has adopted us. He has treated us as His own. And He is blessing you today. We can help you with prayers this morning in any way. Will you allow us to do that as we stand?